Today, I don't want to tell the story of Cheng Chowan. Instead, I want to share a personal experience of mine, Bruce Lee, a true story of struggle and endurance in a foreign land, and how I finally had to cast aside all pretense and fight for justice. The Big Boss in 1971 wasn't just a movie I acted in, it was me pouring my own wanderings, grievances, and unyielding spirit into every frame. The weight of those fists, the tears of restraint, the fire of resistance, I felt every bit of them, and they remain vivid in my memory to this day. It seems I've spent my life leaving my homeland. When I was young, I left Hong Kong to study in the US. Later, I left Hollywood to return to Hong Kong and make films. Every journey was filled with longing and lonely courage. The story of the Big Boss is actually the truest reflection of my inner wanderings. Back then, I faced constant setbacks in Hollywood. Producers looked at my yellow skin with nothing but prejudice. They said, Chinese actors can only play villains, and Kung Fu is just flashy moves. That feeling of being unrecognized and restricted was more painful than a brutal beating. Just when I was on the verge of giving up, Mr. Raymond Chow found me. He said, Bruce, come back. I'll let you make a movie that's truly yours, one that shows the world the real power of Chinese Kung Fu. At that moment, the fire in my heart was reignited. I knew this wasn't just an acting opportunity, it was a chance to clear the name of Chinese people and Chinese Kung Fu. So, filled with resolve, I boarded a plane to Thailand, not just the filming location of The Big Boss, but also a place where I would become an ordinary Chinese laborer to experience the hardship of wandering and the agony of oppression. The beginning of the story is actually the softest part of my heart. In the film, I left my homeland to make a living in Thailand, and my mother's parting words were almost identical to those she said when I left for the US. My mother was a traditional Chinese woman who had always taught me to prioritize harmony and exercise patience in all matters. The day I packed my bags, she quietly slipped a jade pendant on a red string into my hand. On the front was a large character, Run, Endure, and on the back was a safety charm she had embroidered herself. Holding my hand, her eyes filled with tears, she choked up and said, Bruce, when you're away from home, no one will protect you like we do. You must endure everything, give in whenever you can. Don't fight for dominance, and never start a fight easily. I don't care how much money you make, I just want you to come back safe and sound. I clutched that jade pendant and nodded firmly. I knew my mother was worried about my fiery temper and tendency to act impulsively. I had practiced martial arts since childhood, and my skills had made me stubborn and unyielding to bullies. I always wanted to stand up for the weak when I saw injustice. But her words stayed with me. Kung Fu is not for fighting, but for self-defense. Endurance is not weakness, but a way to protect the people around you. With my mother's words and that Run pendant, I boarded a cargo ship bound for Thailand. The ship was as crowded as a can of sardines, and the lower deck was filled with Chinese laborers like me, all wearing rough clothes, faces etched with exhaustion and anxiety, eating tasteless dry rations and drinking salty water. I leaned against the ship's rail, watching the coastline fade away, a heavy weight in my heart. I remembered standing on the deck just like this when I left for the US, unsure of what the future held. When we filmed this scene, the crew found a real old cargo ship. The lower deck was sweltering, filled with the stench of mildew and fish. We shot for 3 whole days, sweating through our clothes non-stop. In one scene, I looked out at the sea and secretly wiped away tears. That wasn't acting, I was really thinking of my mother and my family back in Hong Kong, and the tears just flowed. Director Lo Wei didn't call cut, he captured that moment and put it in the movie. Those weren't Cheng Chowan's tears, they were Bruce Lee's tears. After more than 10 days of rough sailing, we arrived in Bangkok, Thailand. As soon as I stepped off the ship, a wave of hot, humid air hit me, even more stifling than a Hong Kong summer. Low wooden houses lined the streets, and roadside stalls were everywhere. My ears were filled with incomprehensible Thai and noisy hawkers' cries. Clutching the address my mother had given me, I wandered aimlessly through the unfamiliar streets, my heart a mix of nervousness and confusion. That feeling of having no one to turn to, no one to rely on, was all too familiar. When I first arrived in San Francisco, I had stood on the street just like this, watching the traffic rush by, unsure where to go. Following the address, I found my fellow townsman Su Jian. He had come to Thailand 5 years before me and worked at a local ice factory. He was loyal and straightforward. When he saw me, he grabbed my hand and smiled. "Bruce, I'm so glad you're here. With me around, no one will dare bully you." Su Jian's arrival was like a ray of light cutting through my confusion in this foreign land. He took me to the rental house he shared with a few other fellow Chinese, a simple wooden hut with several plank beds, piles of clutter in the corner, and mosquitoes buzzing everywhere. But to me, it was a place to call home in a strange land. That night, Su Jian treated me to a bowl of Thai fried noodles and bought a bottle of beer. As he piled food onto my plate, he said, "It's not easy to make a living here. We're outsiders, so we have to keep a low profile. Endure as much as you can, and don't offend the locals, especially the wealthy and powerful bosses." I nodded, touched the Ren pendant at my chest, and took his words to heart. The next day, Su Jian took me to the ice factory where he worked, the Thai Chinese ice factory. As soon as I stepped inside, I was enveloped in a bone-chilling cold. The temperature in the freezer plummeted to over 10 degrees below zero, while outside it soared to more than 30 degrees Celsius. The extreme shift between freezing cold and sweltering heat made my whole body ache. The work at the factory was simple enough, hauling large blocks of ice from the freezer and loading them onto trucks, but it was far from easy. Each ice block weighed dozens of Gene, and after a day of hauling, my arms ached so badly I could barely lift them. To make matters worse, the factory supervisor was extremely cruel, lashing out at workers with beatings and insults at the slightest mistake. On my first day at work, I witnessed the supervisor bullying a coworker firsthand. A young man named Ming slipped while carrying an ice block, causing a crack to form in it. The supervisor grabbed his whip and lashed it fiercely across Ming's back, snarling, "Useless piece of trash. You can't even do this simple job, yet you dare to take my money?" Ming trembled in pain but didn't dare resist. He just hung his head and apologized repeatedly. I stared in shock, my fists clenching instinctively. I've always hated bullies more than anything. Back in San Francisco's Chinatown, when I saw Chinese people being harassed by white thugs, I'd clenched my fists just like this and stepped in to help. But just as I was about to rush forward, Su Jian quietly tugged my arm and shook his head, signaling me to stay out of it. I touched the jade pendant engraved with the Chinese character, "Run, endure," at my chest, and my mother's words echoed in my ears, "Endure everything, staying alive is what matters most." I forced down my rage, turned around, and went back to work, but the frustration in my heart felt like a heavy stone weighing me down. From that day on, I began my life as a factory laborer. I woke up before dawn every day, stepped into the freezing cold of the freezer, and worked until dark. My hands and arms soon became covered in cuts and bruises, some from the sharp ice, some from bumping into objects while hauling, and others from the supervisor's beatings. But I never complained, I just endured silently. I knew I wasn't here to pick fights. I was here to make a movie, to show the world the dignity of Chinese Kung Fu, and most of all, to live up to my mother's expectations. During my time at the factory, I met many kind coworkers who became like brothers to me. Besides Su Jian, there was old brother Shi, the most senior worker in the factory. He was upright and respected by everyone. Knowing I was new, he often secretly slipped me extra food and taught me how to haul ice blocks more efficiently. There was also the cheerful Ashio, a distant relative of the factory owner who helped with bookkeeping. She often snuck water and snacks to the workers. Once, I suffered from heat stroke, and Ashio secretly brought me fever medicine and a cool towel, urging me to rest. In that moment, amid the cold and oppression of a foreign land, I felt a glimmer of warmth. Then there was the honest and straightforward Ah-chan, who shared my rental room. We went to and from work together every day and talked about everything. He always said that once he saved enough money, he'd go back to his hometown to marry his fiancée and build a house. As I watched the hope in his eyes, my heart stirred. Wasn't that exactly what I wanted? To finish my mission and return to my family to live a peaceful life. But that peace was never meant to be. Before long, strange things started happening at the factory. Co-workers began disappearing one after another. The first to vanish was Ah Chan, who slept in the bunk above mine. At lunch that day, he'd laughed and told me he planned to send money home the next month so his parents could buy some nice food. But when we returned to work in the afternoon, he was nowhere to be found. Su Jian and I asked every co-worker, but no one knew where he'd gone. We went to see Hu Kun, the factory owner, who brushed it off casually. Ah Chang thought the pay was too low and quit to go back home. I snapped, grabbing his arm, "That's impossible. His family is waiting for his money. He would never leave without a word." Hu Kun's face darkened, and his thugs immediately surrounded us, glaring menacingly. Su Jian quickly pulled me back and pushed me toward the door, whispering, "Don't be reckless. This isn't Hong Kong. We can't afford to anger him." I stared at Hu Kun's arrogant face, my rage boiling over, but the jade pendant pressed against my chest, and my mother's words rang out again. I gritted my teeth and endured. Soon after, 2 more co-workers disappeared, each time with the same flimsy excuse. Fear hung over the factory like a cloud. The workers gathered in private, their faces grim. Old brother Shi quietly pulled Su Jian and me aside and said in a low voice, "I don't think those brothers left voluntarily. I suspect Hu Kun silenced them." Su Jian and I were shocked and asked why. Old brother Shi pulled a small bag of white powder from his pocket. "I've noticed trucks sneaking in and out of the factory at night, carrying things covered in black cloth, not ice. Yesterday, I found this in a corner of the freezer. It looks like drugs." My hands trembled as I held the bag. Finally, I understood. This ice factory wasn't a legitimate business at all. It was a front for Hu Kun's drug smuggling operation. The missing co-workers must have discovered his secret and been killed by him. In that moment, I thought of Ah Chang's smile, of his dream of going home to marry his fiancée, and my heart felt like it was being torn apart by a knife. From then on, I became extremely vigilant. I started watching every move in the factory, and I discovered that Hu Kun's men hid drugs inside huge ice blocks every night before loading them onto trucks to be transported away. The supervisors weren't just there to beat workers, they were Hu Kun's eyes and ears, monitoring everyone's every step. I knew that if my suspicions were discovered, I would disappear without a trace just like Ah Chang and the others. But I couldn't stand by and watch Hu Kun commit his crimes, watch more of my brothers be killed. That inner struggle is something I'll never forget, torn between my mother's warnings and my own safety, and between my brothers' lives and the justice in my heart. I lived in agony every single day. Old brother Shi saw the conflict in me and pulled Su Jian and me aside to discuss. "We can't just wait to be killed. We have to find a way to expose Hu Kun's crimes. I've secretly collected some evidence. If we hand it over to the police, Hu Kun will definitely be punished." Su Jian and I agreed. We made a plan. In 3 days, we would go to the police while Hu Kun was smuggling drugs at night. But we were too naive. Hu Kun's spies were everywhere, and our plan was soon discovered. On the night before we were supposed to alert the police, old brother Shi was ambushed by Hu Kun's thugs on his way home. Old brother Shi knew some martial arts, but he was outnumbered and the thugs were armed. I can only imagine how he fought with all his might, but in the end, he couldn't escape. The next day, we found old brother Shi's hat by the river, along with the small notebook where he had hidden the evidence. The pages were soaked with blood. Looking at that hat covered in dirt, I could no longer hold back. Tears streamed down my face. Su Jian trembled with rage, grabbed a nearby wooden club, and lunged toward the ice factory, ready to fight Hu Kun to the death. I held him back with all my strength, my voice hoarse. "Brother Su, we can't be reckless. Old brother Shi is already gone. We can't throw our lives away for nothing. We must stay calm and finish what he started. Su Jian looked at me, tears falling from his own eyes. He slammed his fist hard against the wall and nodded. But Hu Kun had no intention of letting us go. He knew old brother Shi must have passed on some crucial information, so he sent men to hunt us down. That night, as Su Jian and I returned to our rented room, we had barely pushed open the door when we were surrounded by a gang of thugs. The leader was the same supervisor who had always been the most arrogant at the factory. He sneered, "Boss who says, hand over the evidence if you know what's good for you, or don't blame us for being harsh." Without a word, Su Jian grabbed a wooden club and charged. I joined him. In that moment, I no longer cared about my mother's warnings. I only wanted to protect my brother beside me. Though I had always deliberately restrained my martial arts, my skills had never left me. I sidestepped a thug's punch and drove a straight jab into his chest, sending him crashing to the ground. Su Jian fought fiercely too, but they were too many, armed with iron rods and machetes. Before long, a thug attacked Su Jian from behind, smashing him hard on the back of the head. He collapsed unconscious. Seeing Su Jian fall, the fury inside me exploded. I became a furious tiger, using fists and feet with deadly precision. But they were simply too numerous. I took several hard hits myself, my arms and back burning with pain. At that critical moment, Xiu suddenly burst in, shouting, "The police are coming." The thugs, believing it was true, fled in terror. I rushed to Su Jian's side and lifted him up. He was covered in blood, barely breathing. He gripped my hand, speaking in broken gasps. "Bruce, you must expose Hu Kun, avenge old brother Shi, avenge the brothers." With those final words, his hand dropped, never to rise again. Su Jian's body lay in my arms, growing cold. I looked into his wide-open eyes, at the dried blood on his face, at the fallen forms of my brothers around me. The string in my heart, which had been stretched to its limit, finally snapped. I reached up and tore off the jade pendant with the character, "Run, Endure," from my chest, crushing it in my fist. The sharp edges dug into my palm, causing pain, but I didn't care. I squeezed harder, and the pendant shattered into two pieces, the fragments cutting into my skin, blood flowing down my fingers. I will never forget the feeling of that moment, not pain, not fear, but a complete awakening. I finally understood. My mother told me to endure so I wouldn't provoke trouble, not so I would let myself be slaughtered. I practiced kung fu not to show off, but so I would have the power to protect those around me when they were harmed. I left my homeland not to live a cowardly life, but to uphold the justice in my heart. In those days, I watched Ah Chang disappear, saw old brother Shi murdered, saw Su Jian fall into my arms, and saw Hu Kun and his men commit their crimes with impunity. I had endured, I had retreated, time and time again. But what did it get me? The brutal deaths of my brothers, and the arrogance of the evil. I finally realized that sometimes, endurance is merely condoning evil, and retreat is a betrayal of justice. That night, I sat alone in our rented room, beside Su Jian's body, for the entire night. When dawn broke, I stood up, wiped away my tears, and my gaze became unshakably resolute. I knew what I had to do. I would avenge Su Jian, avenge old brother Shi, avenge all my brothers who had been slaughtered by Hu Kun. I would make those who committed these evils pay the price they deserved. The next morning, I walked into the Thai Chinese ice factory alone. Hu Kun saw me, startled for a moment, then sneered, "Kid, you dare come back? Su Jian is dead. Do you really think you can beat me?" His men quickly surrounded me, cracking their knuckles, their eyes filled with murderous intent. They held iron rods, machetes, and even homemade weapons, ready to eliminate me once and for all. I said nothing. I simply settled into my fighting stance. This was no movie choreography. This was the true skill of Bruce Lee, the real kung fu I had practiced day after day, year after year. I took a deep breath, my eyes locked onto the gang of evil men before me. In that moment, there was no fear in my heart, only fury and determination. The first thug charged at me, swinging a machete toward my face. I dodged sideways and landed a straight punch to his chest. He grunted and collapsed to the ground, unable to get up again. I knew I couldn't show any mercy to these blood-stained villains. The second thug swung an iron rod at me. I grabbed the rod, twisted it hard, and it snapped in two. Then I delivered a side kick to his knee. He fell to his knees in agony, screaming. The third, fourth, fifth. They lunged at me like madmen, but their movements seemed as slow as a snail's to me. I'd practiced kung fu my whole life, pursuing simplicity, directness, and efficiency. Every move wasted no extra energy, and every strike hit the vital point. This is the true essence of Chinese kung fu, not flashy showmanship, not for performance, but real skill that can protect yourself and punish evildoers in life or death situations. I still remember clearly how tough the conditions were when filming this fight scene. The ice factory's freezer was cold and slippery, with ice covering the floor. One wrong move and you'd fall. We fought inside for an entire day, no stunt doubles, all the moves performed by me. In one shot, I needed to kick a thug flying. To make it look real, I put all my strength into it, only to kick a nearby ice block. My ankle swelled up instantly, and I broke out in a cold sweat from the pain. But I didn't dare stop. I knew this shot carried too much emotion, my guilt toward my brothers and my resolve to avenge them. I iced it briefly and kept going. Then there was the three-legged kick scene, and I still remember how it felt. 6 thugs surrounded me, and I needed to land 3 kicks in quick succession as I turned, each hitting a different person. To get this shot right, I practiced it dozens of times, controlling the force and angle of every turn and kick. When we finally filmed it, I completed the move in one go, sending all 6 thugs stumbling. The crew on set was stunned. They didn't know this wasn't a move I designed for the movie. It was the result of years of martial arts practice, an instinct deep in my bones. I fought my way through, from the freezer to the workshop, then to the office, taking down thug after thug. Their screams of pain and pleas for mercy filled the air, but I didn't stop. There was only one thought in my mind: avenge my brothers and make Hu Kun pay for his blood debts. Hu Kun's face grew darker as his men fell one by one. He never expected this young man, who had seemed so cowardly and compliant, to be such a formidable fighter. Panicked, he turned to run. How could I let him escape? I lunged forward and blocked his path. Hu Kun pulled a pistol from his drawer and aimed it at me. Don't come any closer. I'll shoot if you do. His hands trembled, and his voice was laced with fear. I let out a cold laugh and walked toward him step by step. I'd faced too many threats in my life. A gun means nothing against real kung fu. He pulled the trigger. The bullet flew toward me, but I dodged sideways. It hit the wall, sending debris flying. I lunged again, delivering a flying kick that knocked the gun out of his hand. Seeing the gun was useless, Hu Kun drew a dagger from his waist and stabbed wildly at me. I dodged easily, grabbed his wrist, twisted it hard, and the dagger clattered to the floor. Then I punched him in the face, and he collapsed unconscious. I tied Hu Kun up and called the police. As soon as the call connected, I couldn't hold back my tears. I said into the phone, "Officer, at the Thai Chinese ice factory. There's drug smuggling, there's murder." The police arrived quickly. They found large quantities of drugs in the freezer, along with evidence of Hu Kun's murders, bodies hidden in ice blocks, blood-stained weapons, and ledgers recording smuggling routes. Hu Kun and his accomplices were taken away by the police, facing severe punishment under the law. When the other workers heard Hu Kun had been arrested, they came to the ice factory and gathered around me, cheering. They lifted me up and shouted, "The big boss." At that moment, looking at these surviving brothers and their smiles, my heart was filled with mixed emotions. I knew I hadn't only avenged my brothers, I'd also rid the city of a great evil. But I also understood that The Big Boss wasn't just a title, it was a responsibility, a commitment to justice, and a promise to protect my fellow countrymen. Those months filming The Big Boss were the hardest and most unforgettable of my life. Thailand's weather was hot and humid, with temperatures over 30 degrees Celsius every day. The filming location was surrounded by farmland and swamps, swarming with mosquitoes. My body was covered in red, swollen, itchy bites. The filming equipment was very basic back then, no air conditioning, no fans. We wore heavy costumes while filming, sweating through our clothes every day, which never dried. Sometimes during fight scenes, I'd get cuts or bruises, but I'd just treat them briefly and keep going. In one scene, I had to fight a German Shepherd. The dog was borrowed from a local military camp. It was huge, fierce, and even the trainer had to handle it carefully. At first, I thought it would just be a simple standoff, but during filming, the dog suddenly lunged at me, nearly biting my arm. Luckily, the trainer pulled it back in time, avoiding disaster. To get the shot right, we communicated for a long time. Finally, we decided the trainer would calm the dog first, then I'd slowly approach to finish the scene. Thinking about it now, I still feel a bit scared. Then there was the food. Thai food was too spicy and sour for me at first. I often went hungry during filming. But I never complained. Because I knew I wasn't just making a movie, I was restoring the reputation of Chinese Kung Fu and fighting for the dignity of Chinese people. I wanted the world to see that Chinese people aren't weaklings to be bullied, that Chinese Kung Fu isn't just flashy moves. We have backbone, we have courage, and we have the strength to protect ourselves and those around us. When The Big Boss was released, it achieved unprecedented success. It grossed 3.19 million Hong Kong dollars, breaking the box office record for Hong Kong films at the time. On opening night, I went to the cinema specifically to see the audience's reaction. The theater was packed to capacity. When the scene came where I could no longer endure the injustice and finally fought back, the audience erupted in applause and cheers. When I defeated Hu Kun and avenged my brothers, the crowd went wild with joy. Some even jumped to their feet, shouting, "Bravo!" In that moment, I knew my efforts had not been in vain. I had not only fulfilled my own dream but also earned respect for Chinese Kung Fu. Many people have asked me why The Big Boss became so popular. I believe it wasn't because of how skilled my martial arts were, but because the emotions in the film were genuine and resonated with everyone. Every person who has lived far from home can relate to that feeling of loneliness and helplessness. Every person who has been oppressed can understand that sense of silent endurance and inner fury. And every person who believes in justice can feel that determination to resist and the exhilaration of standing up. My entire life has been devoted to pursuing the highest realm of martial arts. When asked what Kung Fu truly is, I say this: Kung Fu is not a tool for competition or a commodity for showing off. Kung Fu is a form of cultivation, a discipline that forges the will. Kung Fu is a responsibility, the ability to protect others. Kung Fu is a spirit, a belief in resilience and never giving up. I trained in Wing Chun, studied various martial arts styles, and ultimately founded Jeet Kune Do, all in the hope of passing on the true essence of martial arts to more people. The highest level of martial arts is not about defeating others, but about conquering oneself. It is not about dominating others, but about upholding justice. The story of The Big Boss happened many years ago. But whenever I recall those days, the brothers I worked with on set, and the cheers of the audience, my heart still stirs with emotion. This film was a pivotal turning point in my life. It made me understand my mission and find my direction. I know my journey is far from over, and there is still much I need to do. I hope that through my films, more people will come to understand Chinese Kung Fu, Chinese culture, and the spirit of the Chinese people. I hope that through my efforts, more people will stand firm for justice and protect what is good. I hope that through my story, more people will be inspired to face difficulties bravely and never give up. In my entire life, I have never regretted my choices. I do not regret leaving Hollywood, nor do I regret going to Thailand to film The Big Boss, nor do I regret raising my fists for justice. Because I know that everything I have done has been for the sake of my beliefs, for the dignity of the Chinese people, and for the future of Chinese Kung Fu. Finally, I want to say to everyone, no matter where you are, no matter what difficulties you face, never forget your original intention, never forget your moral, and never forget your inner strength. The Chinese people have never been cowards who allow themselves to be bullied. We carry in our bones an inherent courage and resilience. We won't provoke trouble when there is none, but we will never fear trouble when it arises. This is the true character of the Chinese people. Thank you all for patiently listening to my story. I hope my experiences can offer you some insight and strength, and I hope you will remember, Kung Fu is not just about fists and feet, but about the heart. Justice is not just a slogan, but about action. Let us, together, use our own strength to protect those around us, defend the justice in our hearts, and make this world a better place.